One song. That is all they had. One song that stopped everything. One song that made the whole world turn around and listen. But here is what nobody talks about. Some of these artists had more talent in one finger than people who sold 10 million records.
Wondering if you ever wanna show.
They were not one-hit wonders because they ran out of ideas. Some were pushed out. Some were never given a second chance. Some had their music taken and their name left behind. And some just got lost in a system that was never built to keep them. Across 4 decades of real R&B and soul music. 12 songs, 12 stories, 12 moments that deserved so much more than they got. You think you know what a one-hit wonder is. After this video, you will never use that phrase the same way again. This is the real story. Let's go. Number 12, Dobie Gray, The In Crowd.
I go where the in crowd goes.
Picture a Friday night, 1965. The kind of night where the city feels alive in every direction you look. Lights everywhere, people dressed sharp, music coming out of every open door on the street. And this song is the one that is playing when you walk into the right room at exactly the right moment. That is the feeling of the in crowd. It does not just describe cool, it generates it, right there in real time. There is a confidence in this record that is almost physical. Like the song knows exactly what it is and exactly what it does to people.
We breeze up and down the street. We get respect.
It swaggers, but it does so with a warmth that keeps it from ever becoming arrogant. You do not feel excluded by the in crowd, you feel invited. And that is the magic of it. Dobie Gray recorded this at Charger Records in 1965, a small independent label that had very limited distribution infrastructure, but happened to have this extraordinary voice walking through their doors. Produced by Joe Green, the song is built around the simple but irresistible idea of belonging.
In crowd, it's easy to find rope.
Of being part of something, of knowing the music and the moves and the feeling that sets certain people apart on a Friday night. It reached number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit the top 5 on the R&B charts. It was covered by the Ramsey Lewis Trio, whose jazz instrumental version became a massive hit in its own right, which tells you everything about the musical quality sitting inside that original arrangement. Here is the fun fact that makes this story even more interesting. Dobie Gray did not come from a traditional R&B background.
Other guys imitate us, but
He had a theatrical instinct. He was interested in acting and performance as much as music, and that showmanship is audible in every second of this recording. He performs it like he is on a stage, not just standing at a microphone. And that theatrical energy is exactly what gives the song its particular electricity. Why did the follow-up career not materialize the way it should have? Charger Records simply did not have the machinery to sustain a career at the level this song deserved to launch.
don't you hear?
The distribution was limited, the promotional budget was small. And in the music industry of the mid-60s, a small label could catch lightning in a bottle once and still not have the infrastructure to do anything sustained with it. Dobie Gray kept working. He had a significant second moment in the early 70s with Drift Away, but that first peak, that extraordinary debut, never translated into the sustained stardom it pointed toward.
Leave your troubles behind. I don't care where.
One song that made a room full of people feel like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. That is not a small thing. That is a gift. Stay with me. Because number 11 is about a woman whose voice was so raw and so real that the industry genuinely did not know what to do with her. Number 11, Betty Swan, Make Me Yours. Close your eyes. Imagine it is a warm evening, the kind where the air still has some heat left in it even after the sun goes down. You are sitting on a porch or near an open window, and this voice comes floating through, not demanding, not pushing, just asking, with everything it has. That is Betty Swan. That is Make Me Yours. This song has a quality that is very hard to manufacture. It sounds like need, real need. Not performed longing, actual emotional vulnerability placed directly onto tape without any protective layer between the singer and the listener. When Betty Swan asks to be loved in this song, you believe her completely, because she is not acting. She is telling you the truth. Make Me Yours was recorded for Money Records, a small California-based independent label in 1967, produced by Brad Shapiro. The song is a slow, aching plea from a woman who wants to be chosen, who wants the person she loves to commit, to stay, to make the relationship real. It reached number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100 and cracked the top 5 on the R&B charts. For a record on an independent label with minimal distribution, that is a genuinely remarkable chart performance. It showed that people were finding this song despite the obstacles, not because of any promotional campaign behind it. A fun fact about Betty Swan is one that gives you a full picture of who she was as an artist. She was from Shreveport, Louisiana, and her whole vocal foundation was the church. That gospel root is in every note of Make Me Yours, the way she bends certain words, the way her voice catches on an emotion and holds it for just a beat longer than you expect. That is not technique, that is testimony. And it is the reason this record connects on a level that purely technical performances never quite reach. Here is why this song faded. Money Records had very little national reach. The promotional infrastructure simply was not there. And Betty Swan, despite later signing with Capitol Records and producing more quality work, never found a moment that matched the organic, word-of-mouth power of this original recording. Sometimes a small label catches something true, and the very smallness of the label prevents that truth from reaching all the people it was supposed to reach. Her voice deserved every stage, every radio station, every listener in every city. It got a fraction of what it deserved, and that fraction was still enough to make something unforgettable. Number 10 is one that takes us into a completely different era, and the story behind it involves a level of raw talent that the industry actively failed to develop. Let's talk about it.
All right, quick pause in the countdown, because I need to say this from the heart. If these R&B picks are hitting you, if they're bringing back memories, late night vibes, old playlists, and that feeling you can't explain, then please subscribe to Sexual 69 right now. Not just for you, but because it genuinely helps this channel survive and grow. Every subscribe is like you telling YouTube, yes, this music matters. Keep this kind of content alive. It pushes these forgotten songs back into the light, helps more real R&B lovers find the channel, and lets me keep making deeper, better countdowns for you. So if you want more lists like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a comment with the one R&B song that raised you. Let's bring these classics back together.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 10, Mel and Tim, Backfield in Motion. Now this one is going to make you smile, because there is a joy in Backfield in Motion that is almost impossible to resist. It is playful, it is warm, it has a groove that sits in your body before your brain has even finished processing what is happening. And the two voices at the center of it, cousins from Mississippi, who had absolutely no business being this good, this quickly sound like they have been making records together their whole lives. Backfield in Motion feels like a celebration that is also somehow a smooth conversation. The football metaphor running through the lyric is charming without being forced. The production has that late 60s Southern soul warmth, loose but tight, if that makes sense. Like a band that knows exactly what they are doing but is relaxed enough to let the music breathe. Mel Hardin and Tim McPherson. Mel and Tim recorded this for Bamboo Records out of Memphis in 1969, produced by Gene Chandler. Yes, That Gene Chandler, the Duke of Earl himself, who had moved into production and immediately demonstrated the same instinct for a hit that had driven his own performing career. The song reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit number 1 on the R&B charts. Number 1, on a small independent label, on a song about football as a romantic metaphor. That is the power of pure, genuine feel. Here is the fun fact that puts the whole thing in context. Mel and Tim were discovered essentially by accident. They were singing at a small gathering, not even a formal audition, and the right person happened to hear them. That kind of origin story is so common in the history of soul music that it almost becomes a cliche. Except it keeps being true. Because the talent was always there in communities that the industry was not looking at. And occasionally, accidentally, it got found. Why did the career not continue at that level? Bamboo Records had the same problem that affected so many independent labels of that era.
Honey, but you hit me below the belt, and I caught you with
Great ear, limited reach. The machinery needed to sustain a national career simply was not available to them. Mel and Tim kept recording and kept performing, but they never again had the promotional infrastructure that could have built on the momentum of that number 1 record.
You know that's against the rules.
A number 1 R&B record. Think about what that should have meant for their career. And then think about what it actually meant. That gap is the industry's failure, not theirs. If you are enjoying this so far, go ahead and smash that like button right now. These stories need to reach more people, and your like is what makes that happen. Number 9, Clifford Curry, She Shot a Hole in My Soul.
She shot a hole in my soul. Woman all over.
This title alone should have made this man a household name. She shot a hole in my soul. Say that out loud. Tell me that is not one of the most perfectly constructed song titles in the history of R&B. And when you hear the actual record, when you hear what Clifford Curry does with that title, how he inhabits every syllable of that pain, you understand immediately that you are in the presence of something special. This song sounds like heartbreak that has had time to settle.
I'm going crazy about to lose my mind.
Not the fresh, raw shock of a breakup, the kind that has been sitting with you for weeks. That has changed the way you walk into a room. That has made certain songs unlistenable because they remind you too specifically of what you lost. Clifford Curry sings from inside that particular kind of hurt, and it is deeply convincing. Recorded for Smash Records in 1967, produced within the framework of a label that was a Mercury Records subsidiary and therefore had slightly more distribution reach than pure independence,
To a club, jumped up and grabbed the microphone. African man leading
the song is a blues-soaked soul record about a woman who has devastated the narrator so completely that the wound feels physical, permanent. It reached the lower regions of the R&B charts, but found its real audience through the Southern Soul Circuit jukeboxes. Small clubs, local radio stations that understood exactly what this record was and who it was speaking to. The fun fact here is one that connects this song to a whole underground network of music lovers that most mainstream histories ignore. She Shot a Hole in My Soul became a significant record in the northern soul scene in the UK, that extraordinary community of collectors and dancers who traveled across England to hear rare American soul records that had never found mainstream success at home. To those dancers, this was not an obscure failure. It was a treasure, a record worth crossing the country to hear played on the right sound system at the right volume. Why has it remained obscure in the wider conversation? The domestic distribution was simply not sufficient to build national recognition in the United States. And when a record finds its most passionate audience on the other side of an ocean, that passion rarely translates back into the kind of commercial infrastructure that creates a lasting career for the artist. Clifford Curry is a legend in certain circles. The wider world missed him almost entirely. Some voices carry wounds that the world is not ready to sit with. This was one of them. Number 8 is one that takes us into the 70s, and the story here involves a funk groove so undeniable that it eventually became the foundation for someone else's much bigger hit. That is a complicated story, and we are going to tell it fully. Number 8. The Fatback Band, Wiki Wacky.
Come on! Where the party people?
The Fatback Band does not get enough respect in the mainstream conversation about where funk music came from and where it went. And Wiki Wacky is one of the clearest examples of why that disrespect is both unearned and historically inaccurate. This is a band that understood the architecture of a groove at a molecular level, and this song is the proof. Wiki Wacky hits you in the hips before it hits you in the ears. That is how you know a groove is real. When your body responds before your brain catches up, the percussion is locked, the bass is sitting exactly where it needs to be, and the whole thing has an energy that feels live like you are in the room while it is happening, rather than listening to a recording of something that already finished. The Fatback Band, a New York-based funk outfit led by drummer Bill Curtis, recorded this for Event Records in 1974, during a period when they were producing music at a remarkable rate and with a consistency of quality that should have built them into one of the defining names of the funk era. The song is a pure groove record, celebratory, physical, designed for dancing, and it found significant play on the club circuit, even if mainstream radio did not fully embrace it. Here is the fun fact that every serious music history person needs to know. The Fatback Band has a legitimate claim to being among the earliest architects of what would eventually become hip-hop. Their 1979 recording King Tim III, released just weeks before the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, featured rapping over a funk backing track in a way that anticipated the genre's commercial, Breakthrough. They were at the beginning of something enormous, and the history books have not always remembered to put them there. Why does Wiki Wacky and the broader Fatback Band catalog get underrepresented? Because funk, as a genre, has been consistently undervalued by the mainstream critical establishment relative to its actual cultural influence. The records that built the foundation for disco, for hip-hop, for contemporary R&B, many of them came from bands like the Fatback Band, who worked on independent labels with limited critical attention. The music influenced everything that came after it. The names behind it remained in the margins. The groove was always real. The recognition was always late. That is the funk musician's story told over and over again. Number 7 is one that takes us deep into the 80s. And this one involves a voice so powerful that when it finally got a moment, just one moment, it shook the whole R&B world for an entire summer. Number 7. Phyllis Nelson, Move Closer. I want you to find a quiet moment for this one, because Move Closer is not a song you hear properly in a noisy room. It is a song that works best when you are still, when the lights are low, when you have nowhere to be and no reason to rush. Because this record takes its time. It knows exactly what it is doing, and it does it with a patience and a sensuality that very few pop or R&B records of any era have matched. Move Closer is intimate in a way that feels almost private. Like you have walked into a conversation that was not meant for anyone outside the room. Phyllis Nelson's voice is warm and unhurried. She is not performing desire. She is expressing it, quietly, directly, and the effect is completely disarming. Phyllis Nelson recorded this for Carrere Records in 1985, a French label, which tells you something immediately about where this song found its first real audience. Produced with a smooth, mid-tempo arrangement that sits somewhere between soul and adult contemporary, the song is about exactly what the title says: the desire for closeness, for physical and emotional nearness with someone you love. It reached number 1 in the UK, number 1, and became a slow jam staple that found its way onto countless mixtapes, late-night radio shows, and romantic playlists throughout the late 80s and into the 90s. Here is the fun fact that adds a layer of genuine emotion to this story. Phyllis Nelson wrote Move Closer herself, This was not a song handed to her by a songwriter or assigned to her by a label. It came from her, which means the intimacy you hear in the performance is not just vocal skill, it is authorship. She wrote those feelings and then sang them. And that connection between writer and performer, when it works this completely, produces something that purely interpretive performances rarely achieve. Why is Phyllis Nelson not a household name given a #1 UK record? The American market never fully embraced Move Closer the way Britain did. And in the American music industry of the mid-80s, a UK success story did not automatically translate into domestic promotion and support. Without that American push, the career momentum that a #1 single should generate simply did not materialize. She remained an artist known deeply by the people who found her and barely at all by everyone else. She gave the world one perfect, intimate moment. The world kept it close and forgot to say her name. That needs to change. We are halfway through this countdown now. Which song has hit you hardest so far? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know what is landing for you tonight. Number 6, Zapp and Roger. Do What Did He Blow? That thing. Now we are moving, because this one is pure funk energy from the moment it starts. Do What Diddy does not ease you in. It grabs you by the collar and pulls you onto the dance floor before you have finished deciding whether you wanted to dance. And if you grew up anywhere near a black radio station in the early 80s, this record is already somewhere in your body. You do not need to remember it. Your feet already know it. The talk box. That extraordinary, almost alien sound that Roger Troutman coaxed out of his instrument. When it first hit people in the early 80s, it sounded like the future, like music from somewhere that had not been invented yet. And Do What Diddy is one of the clearest showcases of what that instrument could do in the right hands, which meant Roger Troutman's hands specifically, because nobody else made it sound quite like that. Zapp and Roger, the group built around the Troutman family out of Dayton, Ohio, recorded this for Warner Brothers Records in 1982, produced by Roger Troutman with input from the band's collective energy. The song reached number 6 on the R&B charts and became an immediate club and radio staple. The talkbox vocal style that Roger had developed became one of the most imitated sounds in R&B and hip-hop over the following 2 decades. You can hear its influence directly in work by Tupac. Roger actually appeared on California Love and in countless other productions that borrowed the technique without always acknowledging where it came from. Here is the fun fact that puts the Troutman family story in full context. Zapp was genuinely a family operation. Brothers, cousins, relatives, the whole enterprise was built on community and blood connection. And that communal energy is audible in the music. It has the looseness and the trust of people who have been playing together their whole lives. You cannot manufacture that feeling. It either exists or it does not. Now this is where the story takes a turn that needs to be handled with real care. And I want to be respectful here because the Troutman family story ends in tragedy. In 1999, Roger Troutman was shot and killed by his brother Larry, who then took his own life. The details of what led to that moment, the family tensions, the business disputes, the personal pain that built over years are complex and have been discussed in various accounts with different emphases. What is clear is that 2 immensely talented people were lost, and the full story of what happened between them is one that the family has understandably kept private. What Roger Troutman left behind is a body of work that changed the direction of R&B and hip-hop. The talkbox became a cultural signature. His influence runs through generations of music that most listeners do not consciously connect back to him. That is the definition of foundational. That is what it means to change a genre without receiving the full credit for it. His music was the future before the future knew what it was. And that is why this story is not just music, it is history. Number 5 is one that comes from the 90s, and the voice behind it had one moment of such complete, undeniable brilliance that the industry's failure to develop it further is genuinely baffling. Number 5, Zhané, Hey Mr. DJ.
Hey DJ, keep playing that song all night.
The 90s had a specific kind of R&B confidence that is very hard to replicate. It was smooth, but it had teeth. It was romantic, but it had attitude. It knew what it wanted and was not embarrassed to say so directly. Hey Mr. DJ by Zhané is one of the purest expressions of that 90s R&B energy that exists. And if you were of a certain age in 1994 when this came out, it is already living somewhere in your muscle memory.
All night, all the girls are ready, so we can.
This song sounds like summer, like a party where everybody showed up and everybody knew the words. There is a lightness to it that does not undercut its musical substance. The harmonies between Gene Norris and Renee Neuville are effortless, the kind of effortless that only comes from real connection between two singers who genuinely hear each other. And the groove underneath them is exactly right. Not too busy, not too sparse, just enough to carry the joy.
No, get to it, get the party till the break of dawn.
Zhané, pronounced Zhané, recorded Hey Mr. DJ for Motown Records in 1994, produced by KG of Naughty by Nature, who brought a hip-hop producer's ear to an R&B vocal performance and created something that sat perfectly at the crossroads of both worlds. The song reached #1 on the R&B charts and crossed into the Billboard Hot 100 Top 10. It was everywhere, on the radio, in clubs, on television. For one summer, it was the sound that connected everything.
Night, on and on.
The fun fact here is one that gives you the full picture of how this record was made. KG's production incorporated a sample-driven aesthetic that was deeply connected to the hip-hop world he came from, but the arrangement left space for the vocal harmonies to be the centerpiece. That balanced, beat-driven production that never overwhelms the voices is harder to achieve than it sounds.
Cause your body won't move if you can't feel a groove. So Kate Boogie at the show improve. Hey, now.
And the result is a record that appealed simultaneously to pure R&B audiences and hip-hop influenced listeners who might not have otherwise connected with a traditional harmony duo. Why did Zhané's career not sustain at that level? The follow-up album and singles received less promotional support than their debut moment deserved. In the mid-90s, Motown was going through internal changes and restructuring, and artists sometimes found themselves with less attention and fewer resources than the quality of their work warranted.
Mr. DJ, I am
The music industry has a very short memory for what it owes its artists. And Zhané, who were genuinely exceptional, deserved a promotional commitment that matched their talent. Two voices in perfect harmony, one summer that proved what they could do, and a follow-up chapter that the industry never properly wrote for them.
Oh, yo, there's a party over here. Yo, oh no, the party's over there.
Number 4 is one that takes us back to the 70s. And the story here is one of the most quietly devastating on this entire list, because this artist was so close to the breakthrough, so close, and then something happened that sent everything in a different direction. Number 4, Ann Peebles, I Can't Stand the Rain.
Do you remember?
If you know this song, you are already nodding. And if you are nodding, it is probably because this record hit you somewhere real the first time you heard it and has never fully left. I Can't Stand the Rain has that quality. It gets into you, and it stays. That opening, the sound of rain on a tambourine, that simple, perfect sound that tells you exactly what you are about to experience before a single word is sung.
My window. 'Cause he's not.
And then Ann Peebles opens her mouth, and everything else goes quiet. Because that voice is carrying something heavy and specific and emotionally true. She is not describing heartbreak. She is in it, right now. While you are listening, Ann Peebles recorded this at Royal Studios in Memphis, the same studio where so much of the High Records magic was made in 1973, produced by Willie Mitchell, who had also produced Al Green's greatest records and understood better than almost anyone how to build a production that served an emotional performance without overwhelming it. The song is about a woman who cannot bear the sound of rain after a relationship ends because the rain reminds her of the person she loved. It is a specific sensory grief, and the production, that tambourine, that sparse arrangement puts you inside the rain with her. It reached number 38 on the Billboard Hot 100 but hit the top 6 on the R&B charts, and it has been covered and sampled by artists across multiple genres and multiple decades, including a famous version by Eruption that brought it to a whole new generation of listeners. Here is the fun fact that adds another dimension to this record. Ann Peebles co-wrote I Can't Stand the Rain with her then-husband Don Bryant and musician Bernard Miller. She brought the song to Willie Mitchell with the basic idea already formed, and he helped shape the arrangement into what you hear on the recording. The tambourine is rain effect, one of the most iconic sonic choices in the entire Hi Records catalog, came out of the studio session itself.
I don't believe I can stand here, look out and cry.
That kind of inspired, in-the-moment production decision is what separates a great record from a merely good one. Why did Ann Peebles not achieve the sustained crossover success that this record pointed toward? Partly because Hi Records, despite its extraordinary artistic track record, was a smaller, independent operation that could not always match the promotional machinery of major labels, and partly because Ann Peebles' particular style, rooted in deep Memphis soul, uncompromising in its emotional directness, did not always fit comfortably into the formats that mainstream radio was moving toward in the mid-70s. She was too real for what commercial radio was becoming. And real, in that context, was a commercial liability, a song so perfect that it outlived its moment by 50 years. And a voice so honest that the industry never quite knew how to sell it. That is Ann Peebles, and she deserved so much more than history gave her. Number 3. And I want you to be ready for this one, because this next entry involves a recording that went to number 1 and then somehow disappeared from the conversation almost completely. And the story of how that happened is one of the most instructive things this entire countdown has to offer. Number 3, Barbara Mason. Yes, I'm Ready. Barbara Mason was 16 years old, 16, when she recorded Yes, I'm Ready, and took it all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and the top 5 on the R&B charts. 16 years old, with a voice and an emotional precision that most adult singers spend their whole careers trying to find. And what the industry did with that extraordinary debut is a story that needs to be told honestly. Yes, I'm Ready sounds like a teenage girl being completely, vulnerably honest about being in love for the first time.
Just to make you understand.
About the readiness and the fear and the wanting that all live in the same moment when love is new and everything feels enormous. And Barbara Mason does not approximate that feeling. She does not perform it from a safe distance. She is in it. At 16, she was genuinely in it. And that is why the record connects so deeply with anyone who has ever stood at the beginning of something and felt their heart going faster than they could manage.
I don't even know how.
Recorded for Arctic Records, a Philadelphia independent label in 1965, produced by Weldon McDougall III, the song was built around Barbara Mason's voice with a spare, honest arrangement that trusted the vocal completely. Arctic Records was not a large operation. It was a local Philadelphia label doing its best with limited resources. But this record broke through anyway, because the voice on it was impossible to ignore. It found its way onto national radio, it found its way into people's lives, and it became one of the defining teenage soul records of the mid-60s. Here is the fun fact that tells you everything about who Barbara Mason was as an artist. She co-wrote Yes, I'm Ready herself. At 16, the emotional authenticity you hear in the performance is not just a young singer interpreting someone else's words. She wrote those words. She described her own feelings and then sang them to the world. That level of artistic self-possession at that age is extraordinary, and it points toward a career that should have been long and consistently celebrated. Now, here is the part of the story that I want to spend some time on. Because Barbara Mason's career after Yes, I'm Ready is one of the clearest examples of how the music industry of the 1960s failed young black female artists specifically. Arctic Records, for all of the genuine affection that went into this recording, did not have the infrastructure to develop a career at the level this debut deserved. The promotional budget was small, the national distribution was limited. And a 16-year-old artist without the legal knowledge, the industry connections, or the professional representation that could have protected her interests was navigating a business that was not designed to serve people in her position. There are different accounts of the specific business arrangements that governed her early recordings. What has been discussed publicly, and what the historical pattern of the era confirms repeatedly, is that young artists on small independent labels, particularly young black artists, frequently signed contracts that did not reflect fair value and rarely had access to the kind of legal counsel that could have helped them understand what they were agreeing to. The result was that even when the music succeeded commercially, the financial and professional benefits often flowed to others more than to the artist herself. Barbara Mason kept recording. She had subsequent R&B chart entries through the late 60s and into the 70s. But the sustained mainstream career that Yes, I'm Ready should have launched the kind of career that a 16-year-old #2 pop hit should guarantee never materialized in the way it deserved to. In interviews over the years, she has spoken about her career with grace and with the kind of perspective that comes from having genuinely loved the music, regardless of what the business did or did not provide. That grace does not make the industry's failures acceptable. It just makes her a more admirable person than the people who failed her. A 16-year-old girl wrote a perfect song, sang it perfectly, and took it to #2 on the national charts. The industry took note, and then it moved on. That is not just a sad story. That is a structural truth about who the industry chose to invest in and who it chose to use. Her voice deserved a lifetime of recognition. It got one extraordinary moment, and that moment is still there, still true, still moving people who find it for the first time today. This song is not just music, it is evidence of what was lost when the system decided certain voices were expendable. #2 now. And this one is from the 90s. A voice so powerful, a song so complete, that when it came out it felt like a statement. And in some ways it was, but the statement never got the response it deserved. #2, As Yet, Last Night. Here is a song that will reach right into your chest and find something you thought you would put away carefully. Last Night by As Yet is a slow jam so perfectly constructed that it almost does not feel constructed at all. It feels discovered, like it was always there waiting for someone to find it. And when you hear it for the first time, or when you hear it again after a long time, that feeling of recognition is immediate and complete. The harmonies in this group were something genuinely special. 5 voices moving together with a trust and a precision that suggested years of singing side by side. The lead vocal on Last Night carries the melody with a tenderness that is completely unhurried. It does not rush toward the emotion. It walks into it slowly. And that patience is exactly what makes the emotional payoff so powerful when it arrives. As Yet recorded Last Night for LaFace Records in 1996, produced by Babyface, one of the most important producers and songwriters in the entire history of 90s R&B. Babyface understood vocal harmony groups in a way that very few producers did. He knew how to write for multiple voices simultaneously, how to layer them so that the arrangement became its own instrument alongside the individual performances. Last Night reached #9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and performed even stronger on the R&B charts. And the version featuring Peter Cetera, who added a pop vocal counterpart to the group's harmonies, brought the song to an even wider audience. Here is the fun fact that puts As Yet's moment in full context. They were signed to LaFace Records during one of the label's most commercially powerful periods. This was the label that was also home to TLC, Outkast, and Toni Braxton during their peak years. Being on LaFace in Ninateen '96 meant being in the building during one of the great concentrated moments in R&B history. And yet somehow, with all of that energy and infrastructure around them, As Yet's career did not build the way the quality of their music suggested it should. Why? Partly because LaFace's attention and resources were spread across a roster of extraordinary talent. When you are on the same label as TLC and Outkast at their absolute peak, it is very difficult to claim the kind of sustained promotional focus that a developing act needs. The label was not negligent. They were simply managing extraordinary volume. But the consequence for As Yet was that their one genuine mainstream moment last night became their ceiling rather than their floor. A group this talented should have had 5 albums and a decade of consistent presence. They had a moment, one perfect, genuine, deeply felt moment, and the industry moved on to the next thing before they had time to build on it. 5 voices, one night, one song that said everything love feels like at its most tender. That deserves more than one chapter, but one chapter is what history gave them. So tonight we make sure it is a chapter worth reading. Number 1, and I have been thinking about how to introduce this one since the very beginning of this video. Because this artist had everything. Everything. And what happened to the career after this song is one of the most genuinely heartbreaking stories on this entire countdown.
All right, quick pause in the countdown because I need to say this from the heart. If these R&B picks are hitting you, if they're bringing back memories, late night vibes, old playlists, and that feeling you can't explain, then please subscribe to Sexual 69 right now. Not just for you, but because it genuinely helps this channel survive and grow. Every subscribe is like you telling YouTube, yes, this music matters. Keep this kind of content alive. It pushes these forgotten songs back into the light, helps more real R&B lovers find the channel, and lets me keep making deeper, better countdowns for you. So if you want more lists like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a comment with the one R&B song that raised you. Let's bring these classics back together.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 1, Billy Stewart, Sitting in the Park. There are voices in the history of R&B that exist completely outside of category. Voices that do not fit neatly into any box the industry tries to build around them. Voices that are so individual, so fully themselves, that the only honest response is simply to listen and be grateful that they existed. Billy Stewart was one of those voices, and Sitting in the Park is the record that should have made him one of the defining names of 60s soul. This song feels like summer afternoon warmth. Like contentment that has not yet been tested by anything. A man sitting in a park, watching the woman he loves, enjoying the simple fact of her presence. There is a sweetness in the lyric that is completely without sentimentality. It does not try to be more than it is. It is just a man, happy, in a park, in love. And Billy Stewart sings it with a joy and a playfulness that is absolutely infectious. But here is what makes Billy Stewart extraordinary. His voice could do things that other voices could not do.
Have any sense? Something tells me
He had a stutter, a genuine speech impediment that he incorporated into his vocal style in a way that became his signature. The way he broke and scattered certain words, the way his voice seemed to splinter and then regroup around a melody, it was unlike anything else in soul music. It sounded improvised and completely controlled at the same time. It was the sound of a man who had taken something that the world might have seen as a limitation and turned it into the most distinctive element of his artistry. Sitting in the Park was recorded for Chess Records in Chicago in 1965, produced by Billy Davis, who understood that the best thing he could do was build an arrangement that framed Billy Stewart's voice and then get out of its way. The song reached number 24 on the Billboard Hot 100 and broke into the R&B Top 10. Chess Records had a complicated history with its artists, a history that has been well documented and that reflects many of the broader structural inequities that shaped how black artists were treated by the music business in that era.
I said, you gotta be waiting, sitting.
But what they captured on tape with Billy Stewart in this period is some of the most joyful and technically astonishing soul music ever recorded. Here is the fun fact that shows you the full scale of Billy Stewart's talent. His version of Summertime, the Gershwin standard, released in 1966, is one of the most audacious vocal performances in the entire R&B canon. He took a song that everyone knew and turned it into something that sounded like no version that had come before. His voice scattered across the melody like light through water. It was controversial. It was strange. It was completely, unmistakably brilliant. And it became a top 10 hit on both the pop and R&B charts, showing that his audience was ready for his full range of creativity even when the industry was not entirely sure what to do with him. And now the part of this story that I cannot tell without pausing for a moment. Because Billy Stewart died in January 1970. He was 32 years old. He was killed in a car accident in North Carolina, a crash that also took the lives of 3 members of his band. He was 32 years old and still at the beginning of what his career could have been. The voice was still developing. The artistry was still expanding. Whatever he would have made in the decade that followed, the records, the performances, the creative choices that a Billy Stewart at 40 might have made, we will never know. Because a car went into a river on a winter night and the music stopped. What he left behind is extraordinary.
No longer gonna wait, girl, any longer.
But the weight of what he did not get to leave behind, that is something that sits heavy in the history of soul music. A voice like his comes once, and 32 years was not enough time for it. Billy Stewart is number 1 on this countdown, not just because Sitting in the Park is a great record, but because his story, the talent, the uniqueness, the limitations the industry placed on him, and the sudden, terrible ending represents everything this countdown is about.
Something tells me I'm a fool to let you
Artists who deserved more time, more support, more recognition, and more chances. He deserved decades. He got 32 years. And in those 32 years, he made music that still sounds alive today. That is the definition of a legacy, even when it is built on heartbreak.